Good Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Vicki Wynn in for Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, in the balance, the Biden presidency being put to the test here at home and on the world stage. The president kicking off his trip to Europe in Rome this morning, meeting with the Pope ahead of a pair of high-profile global summits. But his performance overseas could hinge on what's happening in Washington as Democrats decide on the fate of his nearly $2 trillion domestic agenda.
It's about leading the world or letting the world pass us by.
We have team coverage from D.C. to Vatican City with details on the deal that President Biden calls a compromise and what's really at stake. Criminal complaint, more trouble for Andrew Cuomo, the former New York governor, now facing a criminal charge over claims of sexual misconduct by a former aide. Details and reaction from Cuomo's team. Rebranding, Facebook says it is changing its company name. But what is Meta and why the change? We'll break down the move that could signal a shift for the social media giant. And a real-life Halloween scare for parents after candy laced with drugs sends one child to the hospital. The warning straight from the FDA and what you need to know to keep your kids safe before the trick-or-treating begins. A very jam-packed show today. Good to be with you. Happy Friday.
Yeah, it's good to have you with us. This is my punch of Halloween.
I love
here.
it, yes.
A little orange.
I totally forgot to wear orange. Sometimes at 4 in the morning, my fashion choices aren't spot on.
You look great. So.
Thanks, Joe. All right, well, we begin this morning with President Biden landing in Europe for 2 crucial international summits. But his domestic agenda still up in the air after a vote on his trimmed-down bill was abandoned last night.
The president wanted to get his deal over the line before the trip, urging House Democrats yesterday to support the near $2 trillion package. But divisions within the party kept lawmakers from approving the new scaled-back framework. A vote is now expected next week. Earlier, the president arrived at the Vatican for a meeting with Pope Francis. Next up, talks with Italy's Prime Minister and French President Emmanuel Macron ahead of this weekend's G20 summit. The president had hoped to tout his new package on the world stage, but speaking ahead of the trip, President Biden said compromise was necessary to get it done.
I think we have I know we have a historic economic framework. It's a framework that will create millions of jobs, grow the economy, invest in our nation and our people. No one got everything they wanted, including me. But that's what compromise is. That's consensus. And that's what I ran on. I've long said compromise and consensus are the only way to get big things done in a democracy.
We'll speak with NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale in just a moment on the latest developments in Washington. But we're going to start in Rome with the president's stay ahead and NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavonga. So, Claudio, as we mentioned, the president met with the Pope, becoming only the second Catholic president to do so. But late yesterday, we heard the Vatican made some changes to that meeting. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's right, Joe. Yesterday, the Pope said that the scheduled live broadcast of the Biden's arrival at the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican all the way to the handshake with Pope Francis was cancelled. So that fueled a lot of speculation and conspiracy theories, of course. Well, now the Vatican said that in the end, this is a normal protocol under COVID-19. But let me tell you what usually happens is that we see a live broadcast of the head of state, in this particular case, President Biden, arriving in the courtyard of the Apostolic Palace. And then the cameras follow him live to the first floor of the Apostolic Palace, all the way walking down the corridors, all the way to where he shakes hands with the Pope before they disappear into the library where they have a private meeting. Now, the only thing that we saw this morning was the motorcade of President Biden arriving in the courtyard of the Apostolic Palace, and that was it. Now, the Vatican says, well, it's all under control, it's all normal, it's all protocol under COVID-19 rules. Joe.
So, Claudio, even though it was a closed-door meeting, do we have any idea what they discussed?
Well, we know that probably they will discuss about some of the issues they really care about that are very important right now. Well, at the top of the agenda will be climate change. This is something that is very high on the agenda of both Pope Francis as well as President Biden. Why is that very important? Well, because this is going to be the only occasion, the only opportunity they have to talk to each other about that, because Pope Francis has already announced that he will not travel to Glasgow next week to the much important COP26 UN conference on climate agreement that President Biden will attend. And this morning, Pope Francis, perhaps not coincidentally, released an audio message to the BBC radio calling, summoning all the leaders attending that conference to do more to find solution to cut greenhouse emissions. So that would be definitely top of the agenda, Joe.
Yeah, definitely not coincidental, that message. So, Claudia, let's also talk about the president meeting Italy's prime minister and French President Macron. What's on the agenda there, and how are preps going for this weekend's G20 summit?
Well, that's right. Well, he will later on, President Biden will meet the president of Italy as well as the prime minister. But the most important, perhaps, bilateral meeting he will have is later on today with the president of France, Emmanuel Macron. And that is important because it comes right at the back of a diplomatic row, a big diplomatic row the U.S. had with France recently after the U.S. announced a strict military pact with Australia and the U.K. That means that Australia had to cancel or cancelled a lucrative deal to have France build submarines for it, and instead it went for the U.S. to build those submarines. So now they will have to clarify this issue, of course, President Biden and Macron, and that comes next this evening here in Rome, Joe.
Face to face. All right, Claudio, thanks so much for kicking us off.
Okay, let's now bring in Ali Vitale for the very latest on Capitol Hill. Good morning, Ali. Let's talk about what's in and what's now out of the president's new scaled-back spending framework.
Yeah, because at this point, we know what's in and what's out, or at least we have a good idea of where things stand right now. But we also know that they have sort of reached another pause point because last night they couldn't come to enough of agreement and they couldn't have that vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill like Speaker Nancy Pelosi wanted. In terms of what's in and what's out, we saw a lot of the issues that were on the negotiating table last week find their final consensus. On the point of what's in, I can pull it up for you on your screen. You see a lot of clean energy and climate investments, more than $500 billion. It's the biggest price tag item in this bill. A key point for progressives and for the White House in combating climate change. There's also expansion of Medicaid benefits to roughly a dozen states. That was something that members of the Texas and Georgia delegation, for example, lobbied Senator Joe Manchin on. We're also seeing Medicare expansion, but only when it comes to hearing, because then flip to the next slide where you can see what's not in this bill. Things like an expansion of Medicare for hearing, for vision and dental. Those were things that progressives would have wanted to include, but also, and I think this is one of the most important ones, paid family leave, not in this bill at this point, but I've talked to several lawmakers yesterday who say they're not ready to count that out yet.
Yeah, it was supposed to go from 12 weeks down to 4 weeks. I can't imagine Democrats are going to agree with it being completely out. Yeah. Talk about why the president couldn't get this deal over the line before his trip to Europe. What do you think stalled the vote last night? What are your sources telling you?
There are two pieces of this, right? In the House, the dynamics have always been that progressives want to hold the line. They want to see both of these bills taken together. They are linked in the minds of progressives. What progressives needed was not just a framework, but a very fleshed out framework, which is why we've got thousands of pages of bill text now. But they also need assurances from the senators on the other side of this equation. There's a trust deficit, not along ideological lines between progressive and moderate, but also between the two houses of Congress. The House does not want to be hung out to dry on this, and they also don't want to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill only to see the larger social spending package go out the window because of a loss of political will or a lack of commitment. In terms of where those senators are, though, yesterday I followed around Senator Joe Manchin. Many of the other people in the Capitol Hill press corps spent a lot of time tracking him, tracking Senator Sinema, Senator Bernie Sanders, trying to get them to endorse this framework in a way that could be enough for progressives. And we couldn't get them to do it because it seems like they're just not there. For example, when I caught up with Senator Joe Manchin, and he said this several times yesterday, he continued to say that this is in the hands of the House. He went on at one point yesterday to say, I've been dealing in good faith, and I'm telling everybody they can count on me to continue to deal in good faith. They're fine, I think, hearing that he wants to deal in good faith, but they also need to hear him say that he supports this framework and he will vote for it. Because on the other side of this equation is Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal holding her caucus together. She met with Senator Kyrsten Sinema yesterday. This is her readout of that conversation.
I met with Senator Kyrsten Sinema today. It was a really good meeting, very productive. And I've been talking, as you know, to Joe Manchin. We will deliver both the BIF, the infrastructure bill, and the remarkably transformational Build Back Better Act. Today, I see the end.
And I think that there are many in the Capitol Hill press corps who don't really know what to take when leaders are using words like soon and imminent, because we've been hearing those words about when a vote could come on this package of legislation for weeks now. It seems, at least at this point, that that could happen next week, because what they did yesterday before leaving Washington for the weekend, guys, they voted to extend the surface transportation bill. That's highway funding, other things that match in the traditional infrastructure category. They extended that until December 3rd, giving themselves the time that they'll need to pass this larger package, but it's not clear exactly when that's going to happen at this point.
All right, we know when it does, you'll be all over it. Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
NBC News has learned the federal government could soon pay out millions of dollars to families separated at the U.S. border. That's according to 3 sources familiar with ongoing negotiations in a lawsuit filed on behalf of the separated families. The deal being considered would pay out about $450,000 per person in compensation. Under the zero-tolerance policy installed under the Trump administration, more than 5,600 children were separated from their parents. The White House says more than 1,000 families are still estimated to be separated from each other. Now to a major development in the investigation into former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. He has been charged with a misdemeanor sex crime. The charge, forcibly touching a former aide while inside the executive mansion in December of last year. The criminal complaint comes just months after a bombshell report from the New York Attorney General's office found at least a dozen women who claimed they were sexually harassed by Cuomo, who eventually resigned in the wake of that report. Former governor categorically denies any misconduct. His lawyer says the charge is all politics. In response to that, New York State Attorney General Letitia James said, quote, "The criminal charges brought against Mr. Cuomo are for forcible touching, further validate the findings in our report." We have 2 of our best experts this morning, NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter and NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos, here to break down this charge for us. Good morning to both of you. Tom, let's start with you. The charge comes as a result of that 165-page report released by the New York Attorney General back in August. Still, some in Albany were actually caught off guard by it, including someone you might not expect. Tell us more about how these charges came about yesterday.
Sure. Well, the local DA was caught off guard by David Soares. I mean, that's where that starts. He put out a statement last night saying he was surprised, just like the rest of us, that these charges happened to come down yesterday, and said that he's not going to be commenting further on this case. What happened here is the Albany County Sheriff's Office went to the court, the Albany City Court, and essentially said, look, this is what we've got, and we think that we have enough. And the court essentially said, you've got enough, and so we're going to charge him, release the criminal complaint, and he's going to be summoned to court. The governor will next appear in court on November 17th at 2:30 p.m., where he'll have to answer for this criminal complaint that was brought yesterday, Joe. It's based on cell phone records. It's based on, believe it or not, BlackBerry PIN messages with the New York State Police, as well as the governor's travel records. We're looking at a state police helicopter there. They were able to get state police records as well as badge records. You know, when you swipe in to get access to a facility, that's just some of the evidence that they say, the Albany County Sheriff's Office says, they have against the governor. So that's where this case stands at this point. A bit of a surprise, but it is moving forward.
Danny, let's talk about the charge. What does it mean to be charged with a Class A misdemeanor, forcible touching, and what does it tell you about the evidence prosecutors have?
Forcible touching is just the touching of another person's intimate parts for sexual gratification or to humiliate them. It is a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable in New York by up to a year in jail. And I say punishable because that is not a likely sentence for a first-time offender. There's a very strong possibility there would be 0 jail time for a misdemeanor in New York, depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the facts. Because the potential sentence is over 6 months, there is a right to a jury trial of 6. But in this case, procedurally in Albany, after the arraignment, when the ex-governor shows up, traditionally the next court hearing, I should say, should be the trial. But with a high-profile defendant like this, a lot of the procedural rules kind of get thrown out the window.
All right, Tom, we know the name of the accuser bringing these charges was withheld. That's standard, of course. But we do know at least one woman who has gone public with her accusation. So what do we know about her, and do we believe she is the one linked to this misdemeanor charge?
That's Brittany Comiso. She's identified as executive assistant number 1 in the Attorney General's report that you referenced. She has come forward in the past speaking to CBS News and saying that the governor groped her by putting his hand under her blouse and grabbing her breast. That's the exact same type of conduct and behavior that's discussed in yesterday's criminal complaint and in those allegations. So we don't know 100%. We've reached out to Comiso and her attorneys. We've not heard back yet whether or not she is, in fact, the victim that's referenced in this criminal complaint. But it is the same type of behavior, and it's something that we'll continue to watch and see and look out for any sort of statements that may come from her today or any sort of acknowledgement that this may, in fact, be her and she may be the victim here in this criminal complaint.
Let's talk about what's next, Danny. Could we expect to see more charges come as a result of this AG report?
It's certainly possible. I mean, as you mentioned, the AG report is a rare instance where you have an attorney general laying out an over 100-page report replete with evidence, documents, interviews, which is really like a blueprint or a plan for a prosecutor or law enforcement to bring charges. So all they need to do is open the page to the jurisdiction that matches theirs and decide whether or not that report gave them enough information or enough leads to go forward and prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt if they want to bring charges against this very high-profile trophy defendant for a lot of prosecutors. And let's face it, he would be a trophy for a lot of local prosecutors who would want to take down someone with a very high profile.
All right. Tom Winter, Danny Ceballos, thank you both so much. We appreciate it.
This morning, New York City is preparing for a possible shortage of first responders. Police officers, firefighters, and other city workers have until 5 p.m. today to get their first COVID vaccine dose. If not, they'll be put on unpaid leave. Hundreds of firefighters protested against the mandate yesterday outside the mayor's home. Right now, more than 160,000 city workers, including firefighters, police officers, and correctional officers, are not vaccinated, and they won't be able to start work on Monday. The battle over these mandates has been dividing the country. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is now suing the federal government over the Biden administration's December 8th deadline for federal contractors to get vaccinated. Right now, nearly 58% of the U.S. is fully vaccinated. We are just days away from that number getting a major boost, with the possibility of kids ages 5 to 11 being eligible for the shot as early as next week. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us now. Good morning, Dr. Patel. Good news is new cases are down 57% since September 1st. But with the backlash against mandates, winter coming, flu season, do you think we're going to see a spike in cases, in COVID cases in the coming months? Or do you think this is starting to become something we live with?
Yeah, Vicki, good morning. It's a little bit of both. I do think we're going to see an uptick, particularly in areas that still remain heavily under-vaccinated. We still have parts of this country where it's only 33 to 40% of a city, county, in a region that are vaccinated. But to your point, I think we're going to add children to that mix, and that will help to get more people vaccinated. But at the end of the day, it's still a pandemic. And the fact that we're also seeing surging numbers in other countries and that travel has opened up means that we will see hotspots here. But as you point out, we are going to learn to live with this, just like we live with many other viruses that we have vaccines for.
Well, next week we could get that boost. We're talking about nearly 28 million younger kids who could become eligible for the COVID vaccine. What should parents keep an eye on as the CDC now takes up the Pfizer vaccine for kids 5 to 11? And is it a 2-dose regimen for them?
It is. It's a 2-dose regimen. It's a reduced dose of the Pfizer regimen, but looks similar. You get a shot one day, and then 3 weeks later, you need to get the second shot. And here's some good news for parents. In the 5 to 11 age range, the side effects are similar to what adults have, but much less, meaning they do still get fatigue, fevers, and chills. Parents should be looking out for that in the 48 hours after the shots. And then they should also be looking out for anything that seems unusual several days after a shot and absolutely contact their pediatrician. But we have not seen any serious side effects in the trial data. And of course, parents will, if they're waiting and talking to their pediatricians and doctors like myself will also have information based on what we're seeing on the people we're vaccinating.
Yeah, I think that's really important to talk to your child's pediatrician about the concerns that you have and get the answers directly from someone you trust, like you, Dr. Patel. So let's talk about the CDC. This is very interesting. They have now added mental health illnesses, including depression and schizophrenia, to the list of conditions that make people more at risk for COVID. How is that? Why does mental health make people more vulnerable to the virus?
Yeah, Vicki, look, I'm really relieved to see this. Many of us have long held that physical and mental health conditions are one and the same, and studies now show that with COVID. And we believe that people with mental health conditions, about 10% of the United States, by the way, with these mental health conditions, that when they get COVID, there's an interaction between the mental health condition and COVID-19 that makes them more likely to be hospitalized. And with schizophrenia, Vicki, 3 times more likely to die, one study found. So these are just as serious as heart disease, diabetes. And I think what's important for viewers is that this means that if you have one of these conditions, you are in one of those risk categories that qualify you for a booster. So I want people to pay attention to that, take it seriously, and if you have any questions, talk about it.
Really fascinating. Dr. Kavita Patel, thanks for all the information we need to know this morning.
Major storm is expected to bring heavy rain, high winds, tidal flooding to the D.C. area today.
Yes, we've gotten some cold weather, a lot of rainy weather. Bill Cairns joins us now with the very latest. Bill, good morning and happy Friday.
Yeah, good morning. Happy Friday to you guys. And it's unbelievable. We're actually doing this on the 9-year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, too. So, it's going to be pretty wild, the pictures you're going to see from the mid-Atlantic region later on tonight and tomorrow with this coastal flooding. We expect homes to be flooded. We expect businesses, roads to be closed. And it's not even from like a hurricane. I mean, this is going to be one of the worst coastal flooding events going all the way back to Hurricane Isabel in 2003. So let me try to explain why. So we have this huge storm. It's not that powerful, but it's a huge storm located almost right over the top of Nashville right now. And this is right on the heels of that nor'easter. And what happened is the nor'easter a couple days ago built the water up on the East Coast, especially back in the bays. That water didn't get time to retreat out, and now those winds have reversed direction, and they're blowing up the bays. And so we have more water coming on top of the water that was already there from the nor'easter. And that's the reason that we have this coastal flood warnings in effect for the Jersey Shore, all the way down through Maryland and Delaware and Virginia. 18 million people are impacted. And again, this will be one of the top 3 in some cases flood events in a lot of these areas history. So this isn't just like a random, flood event. This will be historic in some areas. We'll also have rainfall to deal with around the D.C. area to Boston to New York. It's going to be a soggy next 2 days as that storm system moves up towards the north. We don't expect too much flooding problems, just isolated. And the winds will also be pretty high, too. We could see isolated power outages, wind gusts possible 55 to 60 on the coast. Inland areas around Baltimore and D.C., probably 30 to 40 miles per hour. So here's those peak wind gusts. So you get the idea. It's going to be a raw, rainy, and if you're near the coast, scary flood situation as we go throughout that high tide cycle, especially this evening. So here's the forecast for today, guys. Middle of the country is going to be kind of windy and dry. The West Coast, no problems with the exception of the Pacific Northwest. They've been dealing with a lot of heavy rain and flooding on their own. So, I call this like a sneaky storm because it doesn't have a name, and it's going to be one of the worst flood events in the Mid-Atlantic that we've seen in a couple decades.
Our Joe is heading up to Washington, D.C. for Saturday today with Kristen Welker. So
maybe.
Good luck, Joe.
We'll see. All right. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
All right, coming up, social media giant Facebook changing its company name.
To reflect who we are and what we hope to build, I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta.
More on the rebranding and what it could mean not just for the company, but for users.
Plus, in the hot seat, top oil execs testify before Congress about big oil's role in climate change. You're watching Morning News Now.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the company's corporate parent has a new name, Meta. The announcement comes alongside a major reshuffle, which follows a period of unprecedented scrutiny for the social media giant.
Yeah, here's what some of Zuckerberg had to say in a video to his employees.
Facebook is one of the most used products in the history of the world. It is an iconic social media brand, but increasingly, it just doesn't encompass everything that we do. And I want to anchor our work and our identity on what we are building towards.
NBC News reporter David Ingram explains the reason for this change and what it means for one of the biggest social media companies in the world.
Hi, Vicki, Joe. On Thursday, Facebook announced a new name and a new brand, Meta. It's been confusing for some time because Facebook has always been both the app that we all know, the social network, as well as the parent company of other apps like Instagram and WhatsApp. This new name of Meta is going to apply to the parent company. Facebook, as a social network, is still going to keep their same name, but the hope is that this will clear up some of the confusion about who owns Instagram, that it's all one company. Now, the name Meta is a nod to the idea of the metaverse. This is essentially another name for virtual reality and augmented reality. CEO Mark Zuckerberg had an hour-plus long presentation online where he laid out some of the ways that he thinks we will all be using virtual reality in the future, much more in our everyday lives. He talked about using virtual reality for exercising, for work, for visiting friends and family virtually, even going to concerts. Gaming is going to be a big use of virtual reality already, and he says even more in the future. And this, is an old idea. It's been in science fiction for decades that we'll all be living much more of our lives online. And Facebook, with this name, is signaling that it's a direction not only for the internet, but for the company themselves. Now, this name change, this new rebranding, comes at a potentially opportune time for Facebook. The name Facebook has come to be a toxic name in the eyes of some viewers, some users. And this may change the conversation a little bit for the company, as it's been going through weeks of scandals related to allegations from a whistleblower. There have been numerous media investigations from NBC News and others, as well as congressional inquiries, other government investigations. And this new name change may provide something of a reprieve, or in the hopes of Facebook, maybe a little bit of a reset in the minds of some users who no longer are big fans of Facebook. We will see how the name Meta plays out.
I wonder how you like it, or is it, I'm not sure what we're going to do. Goodbye to the thumbs. Dave, thanks so much.
As world leaders prepare to meet in Scotland for that climate change summit, the nation's top oil executives have been testifying before Congress. They say they're not trying to mislead the public about big oil's role in global warming. Here's NBC News correspondent Tom Costello.
On the virtual hot seat, oil company executives challenged for the first time ever on their company's histories of spreading disinformation about big oil's role in climate change.
It is time for the fossil fuel industry to finally change its ways.
Presented as evidence, this video of an Exxon lobbyist secretly recorded by Greenpeace activists, which they say shows how Exxon tries to undermine climate change policies.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes.
For decades, Democrats say oil execs have denied or downplayed a climate change link, despite their own internal research showing the fossil fuel connection. But today, every oil company executive acknowledged the industry does indeed contribute to climate change.
Climate change is real, and the use of fossil fuels contributes to it.
This is a defining challenge for our generation, absolutely.
But the executives deny engaging in disinformation to fight climate change policy. Meanwhile, demand for oil and gas is surging. Unleaded now averaging $3.39 a gallon, up from $2.14 a year ago to $81 in 2019. Natural gas jumping 30% this winter.
This hearing is simply a distraction from the crises that the Biden administration's policies have caused for the American people.
Democrats want oil companies to cut production and emissions, even as President Biden has urged OPEC to increase production to bring oil prices and gas prices down. I'm Tom Costello in Washington. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Hey, good morning, Raf.
Vicky, Joe, good morning. The world is facing a syringe shortage as the number of COVID vaccine doses rises. The WHO is warning that a shortage of needles could paralyze vaccine distribution in Africa next year, and it's calling for a dramatic ramping up of production. A number of African countries, including Rwanda and Kenya, have already said they're facing delays in getting syringes. The UN Security Council has called on Sudan's military to restore civilian rule after this week's coup. All 15 members of the council called for an inclusive, peaceful, stable, democratic, and prosperous Sudan. Large protests are expected in Khartoum this weekend as thousands of people take to the streets to resist the coup. And finally, a fish fight gets feisty. France has detained a British fishing boat as part of a long-running post-Brexit disagreement on who gets to fish where. Britain has responded by summoning the French ambassador in London. And guys, this all comes after French anger after that US, UK, Australia submarine deal last month.
Which will be a hot topic of discussion today when President Biden meets with France's president, too. All right, Raph, thanks so much.
Coming up, the race for New Jersey governor with the Republican candidate trying to close the gap against Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy.
Up next here on Morning News Now, we'll run through the issues that could be swinging some voters ahead of Tuesday's election and ahead of the midterms. A Georgia man is accused of using money from a COVID relief loan meant to help his business to instead make a rather extravagant purchase. He's accused of spending $57,000 on a single Pokemon card. Federal prosecutors say the man received an $85,000 COVID relief loan in 2020, but lied about how many people he employed and how much money his business made. Rare Pokemon cards can resell for thousands of dollars online. No word yet from prosecutors on which card the man is accused of buying.
That's what we want to know.
Value. What's the expensive one? Do you know? I'm not sure.
You know what? People who love Pokemon love it. Do you remember the game where you just see people massing on a corner and then going for it? So $57,000 for one card. Wow. Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Expensive card.
All right, Joe. And no, I wouldn't know. So I'm trying to scooch that right along. All right. Well, less than a year after Georgia helped sway the nation's balance of power, Republicans are now on the verge of taking over election operations in the state's biggest Democratic stronghold. NBC News White House correspondent Jeff Bennett explains why.
A new election showdown in Georgia, with the state's Republican-led election board inching closer to potentially taking over elections in Atlanta's Fulton County, a Democratic stronghold, thanks to a provision in Georgia's controversial new voting law. Democrats say it's only happening because Georgia delivered close victories for President Biden and 2 Democratic senators last year.
We will deliver Georgia and Fulton County for Senator Warnock again. So that's why there's this focus, this emphasis on continuing to criticize Fulton County in our elections.
But Republicans, including top election official Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, say state oversight of Fulton County's elections will boost voter confidence.
We've never had that accountability measure before, where you could actually replace a county election board if the situation was so severe.
Raffensperger gained national attention for resisting pressure from former President Trump to find enough ballots to overturn Biden's narrow win in Georgia. And he now faces a difficult primary race against a rival endorsed by Mr. Trump.
What we're saying is we need to have Fulton County fix its problems, and that's why there's a review panel right now looking at what's going on.
Fulton County has had issues. In one of the first pandemic elections in June 2020, voters waited for hours to cast a ballot. Rick Barron heads the Fulton County Board of Elections.
We had long lines, we had poll workers dropping out, we lost polling places. The remainder of the year, we had 5 elections after that, and we didn't have any long lines.
There's no evidence of fraud in that race, but Raffensperger points to earlier this month when Fulton County fired 2 poll workers for allegedly shredding 300 voter registration forms.
What you're looking at is disenfranchisement of up to potential 300 voters, so we want to make sure it's an even-handed approach. We are doing our own investigation.
As Republicans tout election integrity, Democrats point to a political power play.
So what do you think the motivation here is? The Secretary of State is in a tight primary race next year, and Fulton County is his foil.
They're picking on the wrong county this time. We're the biggest and the baddest county in the state of Georgia, and we're going to fight until the end.
Jeff Bennett, NBC News, Atlanta.
Thanks to Jeff for that report. While no congressional seats are up for grabs in Georgia this year, the impact of these new laws will be heavily scrutinized ahead of the state's key Senate race in 2022.
The governor's race in Virginia is getting a lot of attention this year, but one other state also has a gubernatorial election next week. In New Jersey, Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy is running for another term. Murphy has a strong lead, although some polls have shown Republican candidate Jack Chitterelli gaining some ground. If Murphy's lead holds, he's set to become the first Democratic incumbent to win re-election in New Jersey since 1977. Now, we spoke to voters about what issues are driving them into the polls and if that's an indication of what to expect in the midterm election next year. Here's our Savannah Sellers.
Why are we in Ocean County? Because no county delivers a Republican plurality like Ocean County.
There is no other state in America like New Jersey.
The race for governor in New Jersey is entering the final stretch, both candidates taking their messages to the voters.
We're going to lower property taxes. We're going to create more jobs by making this a better place to do business.
We're expanding pre-K. Healthcare is more affordable. College is more affordable. Women's health is funded and it is protected.
What are the issues that voters in the Garden State care about? Like much of the country, one of them is the COVID pandemic.
Concerns, especially with the pandemic, the impact it had on businesses, on health, on communities, especially low-income communities.
My mom passed away in the Andover nursing home. Jack has been an advocate for the nursing homes, and not only that, Governor Murphy had his chance, and he failed.
And as the state's economy recovers from the pandemic, taxes and helping businesses are also top of mind.
Clearly, I'm not a supporter of our current governor, Governor Murphy. I think his policies have done a lot of harm to the state. There's a lot of people leaving. We want a vibrant state. We want a state where people want to come, want to do business here.
It would be taxes and, what he's doing for New Jersey and whole.
Taxes, property taxes, getting our schools the fair share of aid that they need.
He shares the same values that I have. We do need a millionaire's tax and things like that.
And on everything from abortion to the environment, social values are also getting voters out.
The current governor is just so far to the left and just trying to change what New Jersey really is and what it means and what we've been for so many hundreds of years.
I mean, he's committed himself to protecting reproductive justice in New Jersey, especially in the face of what's been going on around the country regarding reproductive health and women's health.
I really just want freedom back. I want our choices to be heard and accepted where they're kind of not now.
I'm very passionate about environmental justice, and Bill Murphy is he has been fighting for climate change in communities of color for the last 3 years.
That was our Savannah Sellers. The New Jersey gubernatorial race happens 1 year after the presidential election and is often viewed as a bit of a referendum on the president. In fact, the last time the incumbent president's party also won the New Jersey governor's race was back in 1985.
We'll be watching that closely.
Yeah. Coming up, trading stocks with the help of TikTok.
Yeah, you heard that right. Financial content is trending, and one unique strategy has now gone viral. We'll explain next on Morning News Now.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs joins us now. Hi, good morning, Bertha.
Hey, good morning, guys. Yesterday Facebook was talking about the metaverse, right? This online world. But in the real world, we got a lot of supply chain problems. We're going to be watching Apple and Amazon today. Apple failed to beat earnings forecast for the first time in 5 years, and it missed its sales forecast for the first time in 4. Supply chain issues and the global chip shortage hurting sales of iPhones, Macs, and other products. Amazon's earnings also coming in lower than expected, and sales as well. The company is dealing with a labor shortage, rising freight costs, and shipping costs. Meantime, Target is rolling out early Black Friday deals with a number of week-long sales starting on Halloween. We don't even wait until Thanksgiving anymore. Now it starts on Halloween, similar to the approach they did last year when they spread out the holiday shopping season during the pandemic. This year, they're adding a new wrinkle. They're going to advertise some deals as holiday best to let you know that this is going to be the best price of the season. Those deals will be unveiled every Sunday and are available in stores and online. Finally, the Netflix hit Squid Game has inspired a new cryptocurrency because why not? The Squid token has surged nearly 25,000% in just the past week, going from about 1.2 cents in value to more than $3. It's a so-called play-to-earn cryptocurrency Holders can take part in online games inspired by the games on the show with a chance to win cash prizes. But as far as I know, you don't have to wear a tracksuit and you don't suffer fatal consequences.
Okay, you don't have to die.
What happens if you lose? Right.
Exactly.
Bertha, thank you so much. Fascinating.
All right. Financial content on TikTok, dubbed FinTok, is a growing part of the platform, but one group of investors is attracting a lot of attention for their rather interesting approach. What's their secret? They're copying what members of Congress are doing. Joining us now is money expert Kristen Merrick. Kristen, good morning to you. So first, just tell us more. Good morning. How does this investment strategy work, and how successful is it proving to be?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and say very quickly that I do not believe this is a sound strategy. But what's happening is they are using several sites that are aggregators of when someone on the in Congress buys or sells any amount of shares of stock. Okay, so back in 2012, just in 2012, mind you, they pushed through this rule that made Congress be more transparent about their stock and stock purchases. So as a result, now all of this is public information. So what a lot of these traders are now doing is they're going and looking to see when, you know, Congressman Smith buys stock ABC, and then they are going and buying it as well because they think that the congressman has some kind of insider information.
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because some people are going to jump to that conclusion that members of Congress have information about the market that ordinary citizens don't. We're not making that insinuation because that would be rather illegal, but explain what are the rules around how lawmakers can invest?
Yeah, so they have to disclose within 45 days of their purchase or sale, which quite frankly seems like a long time. I think personally, having looked at these laws, it seems a little loose, especially considering the laws that I'm subject to as somebody who has a license. It seems like their laws, the rules and regs are a little bit less stringent than my own, which is kind of interesting. But they do have to disclose. In the case of this article that's causing all this this noise, it's focused on Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi wasn't even the one who executed the trades. It was her husband who did the large trades. And so that is getting a lot of, this one TikToker is pointing the spotlight on Nancy Pelosi regarding this particular situation.
Very quickly, any evidence that Congress members do any better in the stock market?
No, in fact, there's the opposite amount of evidence that they don't. But, you know, I just want to point out that this market has been on a straight trajectory higher for almost 2 years, with the exception of what happened back in early March of 2020. So everyone seems to be doing pretty well these days. So it's not like there's these exceptional traders in Congress who are crushing it and making 20%. When the S&P itself is trading at plus 20%.
All right, there you go. Kristen, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, if you are still looking to book that holiday flight, we have details on a flash sale you won't want to miss. Meanwhile, you've heard of self-checkout. What about self-returns? And a new meatless orange chicken. Here's this week's edition of Good to Know.
Still booking your holiday travel? JetBlue just launched a 3-day sale with flights starting at $31. Trips can be booked for November 1st through December 16th for 31 destinations across the U.S., including New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. All tickets are basic economy. Kohl's is trying to make returns easier just in time for the holidays. The retailer unveiled a self-return option at 200 stores across the country. Customers bring their returns to the store, scan them using the Kohl's app, and leave them in a designated area. No waiting in line. Costco announcing it will raise minimum wage for employees to $17 an hour. The company said the move is to help keep their pay competitive as other businesses also raise wages. Keep some of the guesswork out of online dating. Hinge announced it will add voice messages to the dating app. Now users can communicate via audio memos and add 30-second voice recordings to their profile. Panda Express is offering more healthy options to its menu. The food chain will expand its offering of Beyond Meat chicken to more restaurants. The new meatless chicken is available now at 70 locations across the U.S. The company said this is a part of its efforts to expand healthy choices.
I want to try it. I'd do it.
Yes.
Anything
Are you a
meatless.
Panda Express fan?
I love Panda Express. Yes,
Okay.
I do actually.
All right, well, there.
I love all fast food, fortunately or unfortunately, but yes. All right, well, coming up, putting a nasty trick in Trick or Treat.
A new warning about candy laced with legal drugs, and it's already sent at least one child to the hospital. What you should know this Halloween weekend. You're watching Morning News Now. Got a warning for parents this morning. The FDA says to keep a close eye on the candy your kids get for Halloween.
Yeah, you should always do that, but especially this year, at least one child has been hospitalized after eating a snack they didn't realize contained a cannabis compound. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has more on how these legal drugs can often resemble classic treats.
I thought my daughter was overdosing. She was dying. I thought she was going to die.
That is Amina Sarir talking about her daughter, Maya, just 3 years old.
I'm looking at her and her lips are blue. And she's pale and she won't wake up.
Maya rushed to the hospital after eating what the family says they thought were Applejack cereal. But in actuality, the cereal was off-brand and infused with Delta-8 THC.
You didn't know what Delta-8 THC was?
No, at that point, I had no idea what that was.
Delta-8 THC is a compound derived from cannabis. And with Halloween this weekend, there are increased concerns for children.
Make sure that everything has unified sealed packaging. And of course, these products look dangerously like the real candy.
The New York Attorney General this week issuing a warning for the deceptive cannabis products sold in snack packaging, many of them in wrappings that look like classic snacks, like Sour Patch, but also other treats like Doritos and Cheetos.
And in candies like these, your classic peach ring gummies, your rainbow strips, and your old school chocolate bar, all resembling so closely the real thing.
Delta-8 THC is on the market. It's not currently illegal at the federal level because it's derived from hemp. But last month, the FDA sent out a warning about the drug. These products have not been evaluated or approved by the FDA for safe use in any context, adding they should especially be kept out of reach of children and pets.
In a bag of these Delta-8 THC-infused peach rings with 300 milligrams of Delta-8, just how potent is that for kids?
It can be incredibly potent, especially in a smaller, younger child.
In 2021, the FDA says more than 250 calls were made to national poison control centers for Delta-8 THC exposure among minors. Maya did not wake up at that hospital for 30 hours, her mom says, and then experience hallucinations for multiple nights after.
It looks exactly like the normal kids product that you would buy. So please be aware. Please look at the products.
Well, thanks to that mom for sharing that story. That's terrifying. Hallucinations after 30 hours of being asleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Glad she's doing okay, though.
Yeah, well, that was our Vaughn Hilliard reporting. The best advice for parents, really carefully go through your kids' Halloween candy before they eat it, and certainly don't let them eat anything that you don't recognize.
All right, finally this hour, let's visit a hospital in Philadelphia where everyone is getting into the Halloween spirit and inspiring America.
NBC News correspondent Kevin Tibbles, has the story.
The littlest ghouls and goblins are also the cutest little pumpkins this time of year. Or like 5-month-old Josiah, the cutest little football.
He's gorgeous. He is beautiful. He's just sweet.
Josiah was born at just 23 weeks and has lung difficulties. But that won't stop his family sharing the spirit of Halloween in the neonatal intensive care unit at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
We made his blanket a field, and we put him in a football costume with the little hat.
How could you not just love Joshua the chicken? Or Ollie as Mickey Mouse? Or even Baby Yoda starring Keneal?
We love being able to take a moment away from what happens at bedside every day.
How does it make you feel?
It really makes me love my job.
Every year, hospital staff help families be families.
Most days are hard, but when you get to dress them up and see the smiles on everybody's faces, it just brings joy.
Even for a child in the hospital, the spookiest day can be a real treat. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Philadelphia.
Literally Baby Yoda.
Yes, so cute. They did such a great job with the backgrounds, too, and picked very baby-appropriate costumes.
Exactly. Great to see what it does for everyone who's been working so hard in healthcare.
Lifting everyone's spirits.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.